It is Sunday, October 29th, 2023. And in typical West Texas fashion, on Friday it was 80 degrees and sunny, and right now it's misty outside. Weather calls for snow flurries, and it's 31 degrees. So what do you do? Anyway, as those of you who've been following any of my videos know, I'm building a Vans RV10 aircraft. It's a kit plane made by Vans Aircraft. Well, this past week, those of us who are building these suckers kind of got some bad news. It turns out Vans Aircraft is having some financial trouble, and a lot of people have kind of seen this coming. So to some, I won't belate the cause or go through the causes too much, and I only understand them perfectly anyway, but there's at least 3 reasons why Van is having troubles, 2 of which are related to their quick build kits. During the pandemic, they ship some of their components to a company overseas. They manufacture, complete wing sets and ship it back to the United States. Well, apparently, partially because shipping costs increased by quite a bit, Vans was ending up buying high and selling low. So they were losing money on the kits and didn't quite realize it. Additionally, some of the kits that were sent back had some defects. And unlike if Vans shipped some bad parts, if you get back an entire structure that's bad, what do? That's an expensive problem. It's not easy to fix. And then finally, during the pandemic, Vans outsourced the production of some of their parts to vendors who created them using lasers rather than punching rivet holes and things like that. They had lasers cut the parts, which isn't necessarily bad. Aircraft manufacturers have been kind of creating parts that are laser cut for a while, but some of these parts were defective in that the tool path of the laser resulted in some of the edges of the holes being jagged, and this causes them to crack when they are dimpled. You don't want cracks in your airframe. Anyway, not all the laser cut parts were affected, but a lot of them were. And about 1,800 or so people received kits that at least had some laser cut parts in it. I have, and as a consequence, for example, I might have to rebuild my ailerons and my flaps. But for the most part, I'm not as affected as bad as other people. Most of my wings, I didn't have a problem with it. And the fuselage kit, which I haven't started building with it yet. Anyway, between these 2 quick build kit related problems, laser cut issues, and laser cut part issues, and possibly some other things, Vans has now run out of cash. And so they can't continue their operations. And so they're kind of pausing operations. They're not currently taking orders for new kits, and they're trying to restructure and figure out how to go forward. So among the builder community, if you follow any RV building groups on Facebook or on Vans Air Force or Entity forums, there's a lot of concern, especially will Vans continue to exist, or is it going to go bankrupt? And when a lot of people say bankrupt, they think that means the company ceases to exist. What about parts that you've ordered, that you've paid for, that you haven't gotten yet? I've, for example, been shipped what's called my finishing kit, but it's missing some key components like some bearings or wheels and brakes, as well as the front landing gear, among other things. So people are wondering, is Vans going to exist? Am I going to get the stuff I ordered? If I put a deposit on a kit, am I going to get that back? And things like that. So there's a lot of speculation online. A lot of people are kind of upset. A lot of people are wondering, what's going to go on or what's going to happen. Well, the good news, at least from my point of view as a finance professor and just kind of looking at businesses, I'm not an expert in the general aviation industry, and this particular area of finance isn't I wouldn't claim to be an expert on it per se. But the good news, as I see it, is Vans, even though they're in what we call financial distress, they're not an economically distressed company. At least I don't think so. Vans has a really good product. They're a really solid company, and I think that they have a enthusiastic builder customers, and I think there's a strong demand for their products. General aviation companies are not big by a lot of standards, but within the world of general aviation, Vans actually is a fairly large company. To kind of get a sense for this, or why I would think that, Cirrus produces an SR series of airplanes, namely they make an airplane called the SR-20 and the SR-22, and these have been the #1 selling 4-seat aircraft for the last 20 years. Well, in the last 20 years, Cirrus has produced around 9,000 of these suckers. So the general aviation market's not huge. It's not like Ford producing F-150s. Anyway, to get a sense for how big Vans aircraft is, in about the same time period, builders have completed around 10 or 12,000 aircraft. So they're pretty big. Additionally, right now, builders on average are completing a Vans aircraft about 1.5 per day. So within the world of general aviation, Vans is actually a pretty good company. My numbers might be a little off, but they're within the ballpark. And so hopefully you see my point. So I don't think Vans is economically distressed, but they are financially distressed. They've run out of cash. So this means it's going to make financial sense for someone to bail them out. And by bail them out, what I mean is it's unlikely they're going to get a loan for this, and I don't think that they should try to take out a loan to cover their cash flow problems. But there is incentive for somebody to come in and make money off of Vans. Essentially, this isn't good for equity holders, but it's going to be good for us builders. I'll get to that in a moment. Anyway, the way I see this playing out is, I don't know if you'd call them angel investors in this context, but maybe a private equity company, a few high net worth individuals, something like that. There's incentive for somebody to come in and say, hey, Vans, we'll give you, making up numbers here, $20 million, but in exchange for 70% of your equity or something like that. Anyway, whatever's going to happen is probably not going to be good for existing owners. And my sense is that existing owners are going to have their ownership share diluted, or maybe they are going to be completely cleaned out. Who knows? But I'm kind of coming this from the point of view of a builder. And many of the people online or in the builder community, of course, are coming at this from the point of view of a builder. So what does that mean for us? Well, my predictions, for what they're worth, is that Van is almost certainly going to continue as exist. It's too solid a company not to. It's going to be worth it to somebody to buy Vans. And my sense is that's going to happen quickly, sooner rather than later. Again, that's somewhat of a guess, but that's generally how these things work or seem to. Second, I think as builders, we can kind of expect, at least in the short term, you can kind of take Vans at their word. They've released a video saying they're going to slow down some operations as they try to figure out how to restructure, as to try to figure out how to mobilize, for example, their existing workforce to address the laser cut part issue. So I think we're going to see reduced service in the short term, maybe a month or two, if I'm being optimistic, maybe a little bit longer. But I'd be surprised if we saw much by way of service disruptions over a year. I also think it's extremely unlikely that anybody who's put on a deposit on a kit or who has back-ordered parts is ultimately not going to receive those kits or those parts. Even if Vans could somehow offload or refuse to honor, either through a formal bankruptcy process or otherwise, I just don't see how they could get out of honoring those commitments. And even if they could, it would be a terrible mistake for them to do so, and I don't think they would do it. Basically, Vans is in the business of selling airplane parts. So if people pay for some airplane parts and they don't ship it, why would anybody ever send them money again? So for me personally, while this situation is, there's nothing good about it, I think that in my case, what I think is most likely going to happen is that the parts that I'm owed and things like that, I'm just going to have to wait a little bit longer to get them, but I'm confident that ultimately I will. In the longer term, I think Vans is going to have to restructure and focus more on making money. One of the things that a lot of us have liked about Vans is that they probably make some money, but they're historically been run by enthusiasts, people that are in it more for a labor of love than, Vans isn't run like a ruthless profit-generating machine. They're run by enthusiasts, engineers, people who love the product. And I think partially that may have, I don't know for sure, but may have them, what kind of blinded them to some of the economic changes that happened around 2020 and so. They were kind of maybe slow to react. But again, I don't know for sure. Anyway, I think in the future they're probably going to have to raise prices on some of their kits. I think they're going to have to do some analysis and try to figure out which kits are adding complexity to their business but are not contributing to the bottom line. Quick build kits that they were basically outsourcing the labor to produce these partially completed, major aircraft structures. They weren't really charging a lot for that, not in my view. But clearly it represented a lot of risk because now they're on the hook for these faulty, large aircraft, partially completed aircraft structures. Long story short, I think that in those cases, it was sort of like putting nickels in front of a steamroller in the sense that they were making a little money on these quick build kits, but when some of these kits had some serious problems, it's a massive, massive liability. So I think those kits, at least the way they're currently manufacturing them, represent a huge risk for vans, and they may offload that or may forego offering quick build kits. But who knows? I don't have access to their actual numbers, and I'm kind of speculating. Anyway, again, bottom line, I think vans is going to continue on as an ongoing concern. I think we are going to, as builders, see some disruption in services in the near term for a few months, but ultimately I see vans coming out on the other side of it. A year from now, I may look back on this video and say, boy, was I wrong. And I'll be sitting in a garage full of worthless airplane parts. But I don't think that's going to happen. But only time will tell. Anyway, in the near term, I'm going to continue to work on my airplane. I've got plenty of parts to work on. If nothing else, it'll be expensive therapy because I do enjoy coming out in the garage and working on this thing. But anyway, that's my opinion. That's how I see things playing out. And ultimately, we just have to wait now. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'm just kind of throwing out my 2 cents out there for what it's worth. Anyway, I'm going to end it here.